Good evening, people. I'm sorry to say that this is not the Swarovski crystal figurine update that most of you have been expecting. Long story short, my mother passed away a few weeks ago, and I haven't had the energy to bring out any Swarovski figurines. But I was having my tea here, and as my cup didn't runneth over, it ran out. I thought that while I'm here, I might just well show this collection room because it didn't require any advanced preparation. So I'll show you this room a bit, and afterwards, if someone is interested, I'm going to tell you, as my husband suggested, the true and tragic tale of the Yodeling battery-operated rodent. But I'll get back to that after I've shown this room and talked a little bit about our collection. First of all, there's books everywhere. The writing desk is filled with books, and there's also books by our bedsides in other rooms. Every other room has books in it, but this is the main collection. Now, the room itself is designed by me, and Mikko did the calculations for the supporting structures because mathematics is not my strong suit. The architect who did the legal blueprints refused to believe that this could be made out of wood, so we hired another architect who approved of our own calculations and checked them through to make sure that we were correct. So the ceiling is domed and it's made out of wood, and we did the entire surfaces ourselves. The electrics were made by an outside construction company. Electric constructor did the electrics. We also had another company making the masonry. There's a couple of fireplaces in here for any emergencies. So there are no masonry constrictors available. Excuse me, it's pretty late and I've been up for over 24 hours right now. So anyway, the floor is, it creaks like crazy. There's no glue in it and there's no nails on it, and I'm not going to tell you how we did that. This is a kind of we try to experiment with things. And the walls and the ceiling, the beams we used 3 types of beams. No, actually 4 types of beams. Some of them carry immense loads while others take on support. So there's 4 types of wood used inside these walls just to take the immense load of the bookshelf and the second floor itself, because the main structure also supports some of the second floor's weight. So it's a bit of a complex thing, and the house itself is part of the whole house's air conditioning system, but I'm not going to go into that. That's a very technical thing, and it's based on a hypothesis that we were lucky it worked. So anyway, the book collection itself. This is functional collection. This is not something we collected because of value or money or because it's precious or rare. These are books that we enjoy. These are, if it's fiction or comics or something like that, it's book that either one of us wants to read again or has read again. The non-fiction books are because we use them constantly or have used them constantly and suspect that we will need them again. So this is a functional collection. Now the non-book things, they are either they have a value because of their background. Some of these things have been in our families for generations, and others have because they have been gifted by friends, and others because we found them while browsing antique fairs. So, but I'll talk about few things, but this is a bit of a scrap shelf. There's vinyl records and cassette tapes and CDs and DVDs. There's tons more upstairs, but we didn't have space for everything there because there's a renovation going also there. There's renovation going everywhere. There's science and history periodicals over there, and Finnish Polytechnic students' magazines, humor magazines, which they publish for every May Day celebrations. Raunch humor, which my husband likes to collect. He understands their humor, though he was not a Polytechnic student himself. He went to university as like I did. But the telephone up there, that's a functional telephone. I used it when I was a teenager. A lot of my phone calls to my current husband were made with that telephone, and my mother used it up until about 10 years ago, when they took down the landlines. Anyway, then we have fiction shelves. Lots of classics, but also genre fiction. There's crime fiction, there's sci-fi, horror, fantasy. So all kinds of things. There's 3 shelves full of Pratchett, and there's several languages represented, though Finnish takes up majority, and then there's some English. There's stuff in here like this engineer's drawing set and measurement devices and pen sharpeners, old time pen sharpeners and measuring equipment and stuff. This here, for example, was what we Finns call puhdetyö, the wooden little box thing. Finnish soldiers in the front, they were in the barracks and in the trenches, and they would whittle things out of wood or wood bark or anything they got their hands on. They would make little handcrafts, possibly to send home. And one of my relatives did that, and they used it to present those tiny little earrings to a relative of mine. So there's a kind of background there. But the next shelves are non-fiction. Now, 4 shelf units of non-fiction, while majority of this is history, because we care a lot about history, which was my university major. But my husband went to study, he went to university while I was a baby in diapers. We do have an age gap, almost 20 years age gap. But he went to study mathematics, and then he changed to physics and did a minor in computer sciences before doing his master's in meteorology. So there's chemistry, there's physics, there's anthropology, there's astronomy, there's archaeology, paleontology. There's all kinds of stuff in here. But history takes more space than anything else, because that's something we both tend to buy. For example, here we have a microscope, which we found at one antique fair, and then there's flint tools. And I know that my tongue almost made the wrong. I was an inch away from saying flint stools, because as I've said, my language gets progressively worse the more tired I am. So Mikko used to collect comics much more. He has only 1 shelf unit of comics right now. I don't care for comics all that much. I never read them, actually. But I prefer my fiction with no pictures. But he appreciates graphic novels. There's shells and things over here. Then there's his collection, another shelf unit filled with humor, old jokes books and humor magazines. All of these were published before 1980s. So if there's something newer, it's probably not on in this shelf. I think there might be about a dozen or so books after, or 24 books published after 1990s, but not sure about that. I haven't paid that much attention to his humor shelf. There's a lot from 1912 onwards. And these two shelves here, they contain books that we have either read and decided not to keep, or books we haven't read yet. So this is a kind of a miscellaneous shelf. And there's a bunch of DVDs down there too. And then we have, there's fossils in this display cabinet. There's more taxidermy. There's an open wall. We should close up this wall, but the masonry was completed and we had moved on to doing the swimming pool room. So we should get back to this room and close the wall up at some point. There's a couple of fireplaces there. That's street musicians. I forgot the name of that in English. Not my first language. So that's the music mechanism. We tend to shift things around. We move things from this room to another room and keep things moving. So nothing is pretty stable here. There's we move things around the house all the time. So no tea. So basically, anyway, I wanted to tell the story that my husband requested, the story of the Yodeling battery rodent. Now, this is a true and tragic story. This happened to me, so this is not something I heard that happened for someone else who heard it from someone else. About 20 years ago, I collected toys, antique toys and vintage toys. I still have a small collection of antiques, mechanic toys, but at this point in time, I ordered a bunch of toys from either seller in either Austria or Germany. Now, the box when it arrived was much bigger than I anticipated, and the courier who dropped it off looked very angry and departed in haste. And I was wondering about that because the couriers are usually really nice and polite, and he just left and dumped it on my lap, and the parcel yodeled loudly, which it became apparent why the courier was so angry, because it wouldn't stop. Every time the parcel moved, it yodeled, and you know the yodeling. You can check it up on YouTube. The annoying mountaineer alpine yodeling, yodeladidi. It was annoying, and we opened the parcel, and the seller, I'm not sure if they hated me without knowing me, because I'd never dealt with them before. Mikko thinks that they were trying to do a good turn, but apparently I don't think so, because there was a rodent. I think it was meant to be a marmot, but it was standing on its back legs, clad in lederhosen, with an obnoxious hat with a feather up its head, and the thing yodeled. And we tried looking for an off switch or a battery hatch, but I think the battery hatch was inside the lederhosen, and we decided, fuck it if we're going to put our hands inside a rodent's lederhosen. So we emptied the box on the floor, shoved the rodent back in and put it in a spare room and closed the door. Now, we would have taken it to an animal shelter where we sometimes take extra stuff because they sell it. We did this much more frequently back then. We had a lot more stuff that we could depart with. They used to sell it to profit homeless animals. So, but we'd done a drop-off a few days before that. And that was an unfortunate coincidence. So we decided that if we're going to take just the yodeling rodent there, they're going to look at the yodeling rodent and tell us to fuck off and take our rodent with us. especially because it yodeled obnoxiously and we couldn't make it stop. So we promptly forgot it for about 2.5 days. Now, I've mentioned before that the Russian freight trains coming from Russia and crossing Finland shake this house. They are badly, they're old and they carry heavy loads of timber or oil. And the house tends to shake when one of those trains passes by. They tend to do so at night, and it was around 3 a.m. when a freight train passes by and shakes the house. And the rodent begins to yodel. Now, we were fast asleep, happily asleep, and we bounce up from deep sleep to hear the yodeling, deeply horrified. And then my husband looks at me and tells me it's either me or the rodent. And now we were happily married, and nobody wants to lose their spouse because of a yodeling battery-operated rodent. That's not a reputation you can live up to, or down to, as it were. So the very next day I swore up and down, and I took out the battery rodent and I took pictures of it, and it yodeled as if its mechanical life depended on it. And I put up an advertisement in every media that was available back then, which is frankly much less than it is now. But I tried to find someone who would take the battery rodent off my hands. Now, the problem with that is that there's a dearth of people in Finland who want a battery-operated yodeling rodent. I don't think that this entire planet has more than 10 people who have woken up this very morning and told their spouse or their children or to themselves that this is the day when I shall buy a battery-operated yodeling rodent. And those 10 people are probably somewhere in America or other crazy places like Scotland, and definitely not in Finland, because I couldn't find anyone who would agree to pick up the rodent from my house or pay postage for it. So I get desperate because every time a Russian train passes by, the yodeling begins again, yodel-a-dee-dee, yodel-a-dee-doo, at all hours of the day. And every time we have to go to that room, somebody accidentally pushes the box and goes yodel-a-dee-dee. Gets annoying very quickly. And finally, I may have done something morally grey or morally dark, morally contemptible. And I suggested that whoever takes the battery rodent off our hands could use it to get rid of a mother-in-law who is overstaying their welcome. I'm not saying that it couldn't work for a father-in-law as well, but you could pop it into their room and the in-law will depart the very next day after one moment of yodels, perhaps the very same day. Or anyone who has kids and takes long car drives. You know how kids are during car drives. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Mommy, I have to pee. So basically the driver or the assistant could take out the battery rodent and tell their kids to either shut up or you get the rodent singing again. And that's where I may have broken some moral code, because I didn't tell that whoever drove the car or whoever helped who was in the passenger seat would have gotten tired of the rodent long before the kids did and would have tossed it out, endangering traffic mid-drive and possibly endangering wildlife, because no wildlife wants to hear yodeling in its nesting area. And neither did I tell that you won't have a mother-in-law because you won't have a spouse, because your spouse will leave you the moment you bring in the battery rodent. So you won't have a mother-in-law problem because you won't have a spouse. But I neglected to tell that. Anyway, the person, there came a person the very same day when I posted the modified advertisement and said that yes, they want this. I'm not sure if they had a mother-in-law or kids or both, but they seemed very desperate to get the battery rodent yodeling, and they paid for shipping. I suspected if they had turned up and heard the yodeling, they might have turned tail and ran, but there you go. They paid for shipping, and we started packaging up immediately. So we put it in a box, and then we decided, cleverly or so we thought, that we could put the first box into a second box so the noise wouldn't be so loud. But that's where we went wrong, because the rodent began to yodel loudly, and the double boxing amplified the sound, and it gained some sort of hollow quality. So basically the sound was even louder and more hollow, so you could hear it everywhere. And we decided that, oh fuck it, we're just going to take it to the post office and be rid of it. We're not going to take off the second box, just take it to the post office. So we take it to the car, all the way down the stairs, the parcel yodels into the car, it yodels. We drive, and every time there's a bump in the road, and we live in the countryside, so there's lots of bumps in the road, the rodent yodels. Now, I think that every pedestrian that we passed by and every biker that we passed by would have heard the yodeling through the car and been horrified, but there we go. We drive our yodeling car across the little village to the local post office. Now, the other customers in the postal office begin to evacuate immediately when we arrive with a yodeling parcel. People clear out. And we pop it on the postal workers' counter, and you can immediately see in their eyes that they are trying to go through all the Finnish postal office's rules, if there is some sort of rule against yodeling parcels, so that they could decline the parcel and tell us to shove off and take the parcel with us. But apparently there was no rule against yodeling parcels. There might be one now, but I have no idea. They took the parcel, they took our money, and they gave us a kind of if you think of an expression, if you went and offered your closest friend and told them that you're going to butcher their favorite pet and serve its intestines in a souffle. That's the kind of an expression of utter betrayal and disgust that the postal office worker aimed at us as they took this yodeling parcel from us, and they lugged it into the back room while the parcel kept yodeling happily. A yodel-a-dee-dee. And the back room started echoing, and you could see other postal workers popping their heads in utter horror. And we hastily left. And the last thing we saw of the battery rodent was this betrayed expression and sour expression on the faces of these postal workers, which we left very happily to be traumatized by this battery rodent. And I never heard from the person who bought the battery rodent, who paid the postage for the battery rodent. I have no idea what happened to them. I'm not sure if the battery rodent is somewhere terrorizing people, or if it's in Landufell causing mass destruction of seagulls. Not that there are many landfills these days in Finland, but anyway, perhaps someone will excavate a former landfill and discover a battery rodent. And I have no doubt that it will probably still be yodeling to this very day. It's 20 years past and it'll probably still yodel. Yeah. Anyway, what have we learned, kids? Do not ship yodeling battery rodents to people who do not want to receive one, who have not explicitly told that please ship us a yodeling battery rodent in lederhosen. Yes, please, I want to receive a gaudy battery rodent in Lederhosen. If the person hasn't told you this sentence, don't ship. And don't ship to me, please. That was an example. I don't want to receive another battery rodent, please. Don't support the manufacture of battery rodents. Actually, if someone suggests a battery rodent that yodels, burn them at the stake. Accuse them of heresy, accuse them of anything you can imagine, just burn them at the stake. Battery rodents should not be encouraged. But there you go. That's the true tragic tale of the battery rodent and uselessly long tour in our private book collection. But I hope it brought you some form of entertainment, and I'll try to do the real Swarovski update at some point. But good night.